The human mind can't tolerate an unanswered question. When faced with a mystery, our brains literally invent patterns to feel safe. We mistake predictability for safety. But the deepest psychological terrors always wear the face of a completely normal, quiet routine. Psychologists call it apophenia, our desperate obsession to find hidden meaning in coincidences, even when they threaten to unravel us. Tonight's story proves that the most dangerous secrets aren't kept by monsters. They are kept by the people we trust completely. Because sometimes you aren't looking for a mystery. The mystery has already spent 11 years waiting patiently for you.
There are people you serve 100 times and never really see. Eleanor was not one of those people. I saw her clearly. That was the problem. My name is Ruth. In the fall of 1991, I took a job waitressing at Patsy's diner on Sycamore Street in Millhaven, Tennessee. I was 51 years old, newly retired from teaching, quietly falling apart in the way that only people who stay busy can manage. Patsy's felt like the right kind of distraction. Small, familiar, smelling of biscuits and old coffee and something close to belonging. I thought I was just there to fill the hours. I had no idea someone had already been waiting for me. The Friday morning shift had its own quiet religion. 6 a.m., the coffee went on. 6:15, the farmers arrived. Muddy boots, one-word orders, exact change already on the table before the plates touched down. They didn't linger, didn't make small talk, ate like men who had already been working for 2 hours and had 2 more hours of work waiting for them outside. I respected that. There is an honesty to a person who knows exactly what they need and asks for nothing more. By 7, the pace shifted. The highway workers came through, loud, cheerful, ordering in groups, tipping generously and leaving the table looking like a small disaster. Curtis in the kitchen muttered every time. Donna just smiled and wiped everything down without a word. She had that quality, the ability to absorb chaos without being changed by it. I was still learning that. By 7:30, the booths were warm with regulars. Pastor Willis, who bowed his head over scrambled eggs like they were sacred. Every single Friday without fail, hands folded, lips moving slightly, grateful, it seemed, for everything including the eggs. I always made sure his coffee was fresh when he sat down. It felt like the right thing to do. Old Mr. Hatch, who asked for extra butter every single week, and received it every single week, with the expression of a man who had never once expected to be lucky. That expression stayed with me. There was something in it I recognized. The quiet surprise of a person who has lived long enough to stop assuming kindness is coming and hasn't quite adjusted to receiving it when it does. The Beaumont sisters, Loretta and June, who split one plate of eggs down the middle and argued about the division like it was a legal matter. Loretta always claimed June got the larger half. June always denied it with the energy of someone defending their character in court. They had been having this same argument, Donna told me, for at least 6 years. Neither of them seemed to mind. I think, honestly, the argument was the point. It was how they stayed close. I loved them all. Truly. There is something about people and their habits that feels trustworthy. Reliable in a way that the larger world rarely manages to be. You know where they'll sit. You know what they'll order. You know the small complaints and the small joys they'll bring through the door with them. And that knowledge, that simple, ordinary knowledge, feels like something. It feels like belonging. Donna, the other waitress, had worked that counter for 11 years. 11 years of Fridays. 11 years of farmers and highway workers and Pastor Willis and the Beaumont sisters. She knew every regular by name, by order, by mood. She knew who needed the coffee before they sat down and who needed a minute before you approached. She knew whose husband had been sick and whose grandchild had just started walking and whose garden had come in well that summer. She carried all of it lightly, like it was simply part of the job. Which for her it was. She taught me everything in the first 2 weeks, not just the orders and the sections and the way Curtis liked tickets written. She taught me how to read a room, how to move through a busy diner without disturbing the particular quiet that people come to a place like Patsy's to find. I was a good student. 31 years of teaching had made me one. By September, I thought I understood that diner completely. Every corner, every customer, every Friday. I was wrong about one of them. Here is section 3 expanded to 500 words. Same voice. Nothing changed, just deeper. Eleanor came in at 7:30 exactly. Not 7:28, not 7:32. 7:30. Every time. As if she had made an arrangement with the clock that the rest of us were not aware of. Corner booth by the window. Always alone. Always the same seat, as if she had reserved it in some agreement made long before I arrived. Before I ever set foot in that diner. The booth was never taken when she came in. Not once. In all the Fridays that followed, I never saw another customer sit there before 7:30. I noticed that eventually, but not yet. Not that first morning. That first morning, I only noticed her. She was not a remarkable-looking woman. That is not an unkind thing to say. I only mean that nothing about her appearance announced itself. Medium height, silver hair, neatly kept. A dark coat she folded carefully over the seat beside her before she sat down. Hands that she placed on the table quietly, one over the other, like someone settling in for something they had done many times before. She could have been anyone's grandmother, anyone's neighbor, the kind of woman you pass in a grocery store and feel immediately, instinctively safe beside. That was the first thing I noticed. That feeling of safety. Which is strange, looking back, because safety is not usually the first thing you notice about a stranger. The first Friday I served her, I walked over with my pad uncapped and ready. The diner was busy behind me. Curtis was sliding plates through the kitchen window. The Beaumont sisters were mid-argument. Pastor Willis was on his second coffee. I reached her table. She looked up at me. Pale eyes, very still. That small, patient smile, the kind that doesn't ask anything of you, the kind that simply waits. As if she already knew how the next few moments would go. I looked down at my pad. The order was already written. Oatmeal with honey, black coffee, water, no ice. My handwriting. Neat, unhurried, exactly the way I always wrote. I stood there a moment longer than I should have, staring at those 3 lines, trying to remember writing them, trying to locate the moment somewhere in the blur of the morning rush, when I had walked over before, anticipated her order, written it down, and then simply forgotten doing so. I could not find that moment. It wasn't there. The diner was busy. Donna was calling my name from across the room. I looked up. Eleanor was watching me with that same quiet expression, not curious, not concerned. Just waiting. Patient in a way that felt old, deeper than politeness. I looked back down at the pad. Oatmeal with honey, black coffee, water, no ice. I delivered the order and moved on. I told myself I must have written it without thinking, that I had anticipated her somehow. That the mind does strange things when you are tired, and the morning is loud and your feet already ache, and you are 51 years old and still figuring out who you are without a classroom to return to. The mind plays small tricks. Everyone knows that. I delivered the order. I refilled Pastor Willis's coffee. I smiled at the Beaumont sisters. I moved on. I told myself it was nothing. Most mistakes begin exactly that way. Not with a dramatic choice, not with a moment you recognize as dangerous. Just a small, quiet decision to look away from something you are not yet ready to look at directly. The second Friday, I held my pad the entire walk across the diner. Pen in hand, eyes down, watching myself. Every step. I was not going to look away this time. I was not going to let the morning rush give me an excuse. I wanted to catch myself in the act, the moment of anticipation, the unconscious writing, the small trick the tired mind plays on itself. I was going to find the explanation. I reached Eleanor's table. She looked up with that same unhurried smile. I looked at my pad. The order was there, already written. I stood very still. I felt something shift inside my chest, not quite fear, something quieter than fear. The feeling of standing in a room and realizing the furniture has all moved 1 inch to the left. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could point to and name. Just wrong. The third Friday, I kept my pad in my apron pocket until the very moment I stood at her table. I did not take it out once during the entire walk across the diner. I held it against my side through the fabric of my apron. I pulled it out only as she looked up at me. Oatmeal with honey, black coffee, water, no ice. I stopped trying to explain it after that. Not because I had found an answer, because I understood, standing there holding that pad, that no answer I could find on my own was going to be sufficient. I started watching her from across the diner after that. She never spoke to the other customers, never waved anyone over, never seemed lonely exactly, more like someone who had simply made peace, long ago, with being alone in a crowd. She looked out the window. She ate slowly. She left $2 under the water glass at 8:15 like clockwork. Every Friday, without variation. But whenever she walked through the door, there was always that pause. Conversations stumbling mid-sentence. Heads turning, just briefly, just slightly, and then everything resumed. As if nothing had happened. Like the room had taken one quiet breath. And let it out. I started arriving early on Fridays. I started keeping a separate notebook. Dates, times, observations, the small things I was afraid I would convince myself I had imagined if I did not write them down immediately. I told myself I was being foolish. A 51-year-old woman keeping a notebook about a diner regular who ordered oatmeal every Friday morning. Foolish. I kept telling myself that for weeks. I kept the notebook anyway. It was a slow Friday in late October. Few tables, gray light through the windows. The kind of morning that feels like it is waiting for something, holding its breath, not yet ready to become the day it is going to be. I noticed the quiet when I arrived. Even Curtis in the kitchen was subdued. Donna was wiping the counter in long, slow strokes. Something in the air felt, paused. I brought Eleanor her oatmeal. She looked up and said, very quietly, no preamble, no setup, no warming to it. How are you sleeping, Ruth? I had never told her my name. My name tag had snapped 2 weeks before. A small plastic thing, cracked clean across the middle. I kept meaning to replace it. I hadn't gotten around to it. For 2 weeks, I had been working every Friday without it. Eleanor had never asked my name. I had never offered it. We had exchanged nothing but oatmeal and coffee, and $2 under a water glass. I stood there with the coffee pot in my hand, and said nothing. The coffee pot suddenly felt very heavy. She tilted her head just slightly, the way a person does when they are being careful with you, when they know the next thing they say is going to land hard and they want to give you a moment to brace for it. You've been dreaming about the school again. Not a question. A statement, quiet and certain, the way you state something you have known for a while and have simply been waiting for the right moment to say. I had been. Every night that week. My old classroom. The particular yellow of the morning light through those windows. The children's faces looking up at me, not any specific children, just the impression of them, the feeling of being needed and present and exactly where I was supposed to be. And underneath all of it, that feeling of having forgotten something I could not name. Something important, something I had left behind somewhere and could not find my way back to. Private dreams, the kind you don't mention even to people who love you, the kind that feel too shapeless and too tender to survive being spoken aloud. I had not told Gerald. I had not told my daughter. I had not written them in the notebook I kept for Eleanor observations. They were mine, only mine. My legs made a decision. My mind hadn't quite reached yet. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. The coffee pot is still in my hand, probably looking like a woman who had briefly forgotten what century she was in. Eleanor did not seem surprised. She folded her hands on the table, waited. The way she always waited, patient and unhurried and certain that what was coming next would arrive in its own time. Then she said, "You came here because you were grieving something you couldn't put a name to. You thought staying busy would be enough. It helped a little, but that isn't why you stayed." I asked her, my voice smaller than I intended, why I stayed. She looked out the window. A long moment. The gray October light, the empty street, a single car passing slowly, unhurried. Then back at me. "Because you were supposed to sit down." The ceiling fan turned overhead. A fork clinked somewhere behind me. The world kept going in that ordinary, indifferent way it has, completely unbothered by the fact that something inside me had just shifted in a way I could not yet measure or explain. And I sat across from a woman who knew things about me that I had never said out loud to anyone. I didn't go back the following Friday. I woke up that morning, made my coffee, put on my shoes, and then sat down at the kitchen table and did not get up again. I told myself I needed rest, that my feet had been bothering me, that one Friday off was not a significant thing. Or the one after that. November arrived quietly. The leaves came down. The mornings got colder. I found other ways to fill the hours, things that did not require me to walk through a certain door and carry a coffee pot past a certain corner booth. I was not afraid exactly. I am still not sure what I was. Donna called me sometime in November. Her voice was the same as always, calm, unhurried, carrying that quality she had of making ordinary sentences feel like they had been considered carefully before being spoken. She didn't ask where I'd been, didn't ask if I was coming back, didn't fill the silence with anything unnecessary. She just said quietly, "She asked about you." 3 words. I held the phone and looked out the window at the gray November yard and did not say anything for a long moment. "She asked about you." I didn't know what to do with that sentence. What it meant, what Eleanor had asked exactly, what Donna had said in return, whether there was concern in it or simply observation. I still don't know, honestly. I thanked Donna. We said goodbye. I set the phone down and stood in my kitchen for a long time doing nothing at all. I moved back to Knoxville that winter. Went on with my life. Grandchildren, a garden, church on Sundays, all the ordinary things that hold a person together when the extraordinary things have loosened something inside them that they cannot quite fasten back down. I was fine. I want to be clear about that. I was perfectly fine. But Eleanor never fully left. Some mornings, standing at the sink, coffee going cold beside me, the yard quiet outside the window, I would hear her voice again. "How are you sleeping, Ruth?" The way she said my name. Before she had any right to know it, before I had given it, before there was any reasonable explanation for how it was already hers to use. The dreams she described, the classroom, the children's faces, the feeling of something forgotten that I still could not name even years later. The $2 under the water glass. Every single Friday, for 11 years before I ever set foot in that diner. 11 years of oatmeal and black coffee and water with no ice, and $2 placed quietly under a glass by a woman who was waiting for something. Or someone that she somehow already knew was coming. I called Donna once, about a year later. Asked her how long Eleanor had been coming in. Donna was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that tells you the person on the other end is deciding how much to say. Then, as long as I can remember, and I started here in '79. I did the math. I stood in my kitchen in Knoxville with the phone in my hand, and I did the math. And then I set the phone down very carefully on the counter beside the sink. And I sat with that for a very long time. I am in my 80s now. And that corner booth still finds me. Not in a frightening way, more the way a song finds you, unexpected, arriving from somewhere you cannot quite locate, carrying something you thought you had put down. I never decided what Eleanor was. A woman with a gift she had never asked for, something older and quieter than that, or perhaps simply someone who had learned to pay attention in ways the rest of us never quite manage. I don't know. What I know is this. Some mornings have a weight to them that ordinary mornings don't. That Friday in October was one of mine. You were supposed to sit down. Maybe she was right. Maybe some of us spend years arriving at the place we were always meant to be. If stories like this one stay with you, quiet, human, and not quite explainable, Rosemary Whispers was made for you. No noise, no rush, just the kind of stories that sit with you long after they're done.